Perfect. Perfect. How's everyone doing? I can feel the energy in here today, literally as it busted through the door of the opening panel. But no, I'm really excited to be here. I was at this event 3 years ago, and there's a lot of new faces here now that there weren't then, which is really exciting if you think about it, because that means there's more people invested in building out the future of TV, right? And why not? Right? It's such a good time to be in TV, because for the first time, you can actually speak to the exact audience you want with an impactful message on one of the most engaging platforms, right? And we're gonna hear a lot today on new creative executions, total video, total TV, but before we get there, I think we really need to understand the fundamentals of the landscape that we run in, right? And it's only then can we actually maximize the value for our clients, but almost just as importantly, maybe even more importantly, figure out user experience, right? Because users are choosing connected TV, right? Actually, this is a great study that Rogers and Tubi did, along with some Ampere analysis that we did, is that connected TV is the #1 place to go when you want to stream video, right? You don't need to see this stat to understand that you're going to go home tonight and probably stream something on your TV. There's increased adoption, or maybe better yet, acceptance, right? The younger generation have not bought cable TV, right? So that's a new generation that's coming through. But more importantly, what we found out is that when people have an advertising-based medium to watch TV, they're actually streaming in almost an hour longer than the subscription base. So in this environment, you have them on their preferred device, right? You have an audience that is adopting it, but also you have them when they're the most engaged. Well, perfect. So this shift has left us with 3 different groups, right? What we like to call the linear subscribers, so people that are primarily still watching linear on their set-top box. We have the cord cutters or reducers that still have set-top box, but might slowly start to switch. Or the cord nevers, right? And this is actually beyond riveting stuff, Wade. This is great. And I think the most betting apps have the over-under on this stat about 15. I hammered the over. But ultimately, what we have to do is we're asking ourselves 3 burning questions, right? What we owe to our clients, right? The big one is, how do I maintain, right? How do I maintain that great reach that linear still provides, right? The next one is on the cord cutters or cord reducers. How do I prepare for that audience? That audience is eroding, it's starting to fade away from linear, and we got to prepare for that. The last one is, how do I access, right? It doesn't matter how many GRPs you throw out there, this is an audience that you'll never reach on TV. And the 2 biggest ones that we got to focus on right now is on the cord nevers, cord cutters, and reducers, right? So simple strategy, well, why don't I just shift budget into connected TV and I'll find that audience? Pretty easy, right? It's like, well, I can assure you it's not. Because the one thing I've found out in helping build out Finecast for the last 3.5 years is that there's a consistent theme that we see, is that there's a missed opportunity in finding that audience, because there's a fundamental gap between the audience that we want to access, or audience we want to target, and how we access our inventory, or more importantly, our understanding of how we access that inventory, right? If you think about it, the sum of the inventory's parts is audience. Right? I could be up here and I could build you an audience about average-looking guys with great mustaches, but ultimately, that's not ultimately going to scale, because if we don't understand the environment where our audience is watching, we won't scale that audience in that environment. And let me show you what I mean. Right? There's a whole new ton of fragmentation that we're dealing with. Right? On the top, we have our distribution providers where you're going to buy the inventory from, and their owned and operated inventory they have access to. And everyone calm down. I know I don't have everyone up here. It's okay. But I mean, ultimately, the idea here is the fact that there's increased fragmentation. And also, I couldn't fit everyone on this to make it legible. Also, I've been up here for about 3 minutes. I think 4 new apps just launched in Canada. So it's created this increased fragmentation. But if you think about you as a user, right, the viewing experience has never been better. If you think of this last year, right, Roku just launched a movie at TIFF. Right? Samsung just relaunched their TV Plus. I mean, the integrations that Chorus and Rogers have had with Amazon, with Stack and City TV, for us as a user, it's never been better. For us as a marketer, it's never been more difficult. Right? It's never been more difficult to access the same audience with the ease of use we did on linear, right? Because of this fragmentation. But there's a whole different level of what we have to think about. It's not just access to the inventory. There's a whole other depth of fragmentation we have to think of. Because most content providers are held to the distribution of the device that they're on. Right? If someone doesn't have a Roku TV or a Fire Stick in their house, that is someone that you'll never be able to access. But the biggest piece that we see now is user adoption. Right? Just because an app is out there does not mean that someone needs to download it. Like RIP Quibi and CNN Plus, right? That's exactly it. Right? But if you also, the other side is just because they have downloaded it doesn't mean they need to watch it. right? And I think that's why these providers have made significant investments in the content that they have to keep those users engaged and keep us as marketers on our toes. So, what opportunity can I be missing? Right? I have a connected TV strategy, let's run with it. So I'm gonna give you a bit of our trade secrets at Finecast to some capacity, right? So what I did is I took the top, say, 13 apps that we all enjoy and love, and I anonymized them because I don't want anyone to come up here and slap me, but I also don't want this to take away from the chat that we have about understanding our environment. So what we built is an impression scale, right? From our data for the last 2.5 years, where do we get the most scale from? So that's large, if you see the green dot. Moderate, yellow, so inconsistent but still has some scale, and then red, either no access or very limited scale. And then on the left-hand side, we did the providers, right, where you buy it from. And what we found is that one of our providers has access to some of the apps, and that's from their owned and operated inventory or the carriage deals that they had. Where they didn't have scale, obviously, is from the walled gardens and owned and operated systems that you just wouldn't have access to. But the biggest one that we dug into, right, was in terms of how we accessed our inventory, right, and user adoption, right? These were apps that this partner did have, but we didn't see a lot of scale against. And that could be from where we access it, either from direct all the way down to, say, an open exchange inventory, or user adoption, right? And we consistently see this theme. It's a bit of Tetris as we kind of go down, right? From as we start layering on different partners, different providers, and different understanding, is that in order to properly build our audience, we need to have an understanding of the landscape that we build in, right? Because if you don't, you're gonna see these different gaps. And these are gaps in audiences that you'll never be able to hit if you don't properly understand where the inventory is running. And that's kind of what we're basically talking about, right? When I looked at this siloed approach, when it's either working with a couple providers or not actually, not an inventory first approach, we realized that around 42% of Canada's scale is on a per app basis. But if you properly work with the providers in this room and understand their distribution, understand the scale that they have, you can actually dramatically and drastically increase the scale and reach across Canada, right? And that is the foundation for how you're going to build your audience, for how you're going to access that audience and provide scale and get your client's message directly into the hands of the proper user. And shameless plug, this is what we've done at Finecast, right? Is that ultimately what we've done is that, to be honest, when we started, we're an audience-first company, right? When we first started, it's like, well, let's build an audience and run it. And what we found is it didn't really scale, right? Our reach was low, frequency was through the roof. So we took a step back, and we worked with each individual provider and see what is the landscape, what is the adoption, and what type of scale can we get. It was only then can we actually build out a proper audience strategy that delivers value for our clients at scale. And actually understand the distribution of each household that's within there. And then ultimately, increase that complementary linear scale as well, right? Because we can't just be running on connected TV without understanding the impact or incremental reach that it has on linear. So, I think I probably saved us some time there. What I want to say here is that in order to bridge that gap of missed opportunity between the audience you want to access and target versus the inventory that you need to understand, there's 3 things. One, have a proper strategy. Understand that your audience is shifting to connected TV, but there still is a lot of value in linear. So how do those two complement each other, right? Have a strategy around how you're going to prepare for those that are reducing, the audience you might not ever hit again with linear, and how do you access those core nevers, right? Those ones that won't adopt linear. From there, once you understand that people are switching to connected TV, understand the impact and scale that it has on that landscape. Right? That is going to be the foundation for how you build your audience and how you're going to target that user. Right? And when it comes to audience, again, really have that stacked approach. Really understand with the people in this room of where they're running, how we can run it, and how we build that overall audience. And that's it. Thank you. Save some time.